Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Foreign Service Information Session. My name is Shay Masterson with the Office of National Scholarships Advisement here at ASU. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to share with you all about the fellowships that can help you enter the Foreign Service. And to just go ahead and get us started, here's a brief overview of what we'll be kind of covering in the next roughly hour. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to ONSA, or the Office of National Scholarships Advisement, first. Again, just in case you're not familiar with our office already. Then I'm going to turn things over to our special guest, Southwest Diplomat in Residence, Antoinette Hurtado, who's here with us. She's going to share a little bit about what the Foreign Service is, and as an FSO herself, she'll have an opportunity to share with you all what that life is kind of like. Then we'll transition into the actual fellowships. So what fellowships can help you pursue that route? And there's also some additional opportunities besides the graduate fellowships that you might be interested in, especially if you're not quite ready for those yet. And we'll end on just your next steps. So things to keep in mind over the coming days and weeks if you're going to pursue these opportunities. So please feel free. There's not an official Q&A section. So if you do have questions, feel free to ask those as you have them. You can type them into the chat and I will keep an eye on it. If I don't answer it in that moment or have Antoinette answer it in that moment, that's probably because it's coming up shortly. But you can feel free to drop those questions in the chat as you have them. So without further ado, we'll kind of get to the main event. So the Lorraine W. Frank Office of National Scholarships Advisement here at ASU, or ONSA as we're commonly called, is here to help ASU students and alumni pursue external awards. So these are national or international scholarships and fellowships that are provided by entities like federal agencies. The Department of State is a large funder and provider of national scholarships and fellowships. But then there's also other entities as well, private foundations, corporations, foreign governments that provide some of these opportunities. So these are not your ASU scholarships. These are things outside of the ASU universe that our office just helps Sun Devils in their pursuit of them. So what that means is we provide general guidance and information on what opportunities are available. So we do that through information sessions like this, through direct outreach to our student and alumni population. And then we give guidance and feedback throughout the application process. So we help you prepare your strongest application possible for any number of the awards that you might pursue. That can involve a lot of writing feedback and guidance, as all of these will require written statements. Some of them might require interviews as well. The graduate fellowships for the Foreign Service, which we're going to discuss primarily today, they will require an interview if you make it to that stage of the process. We can help you prepare for that component of it. Also giving general guidance and preparation for other components of the process, like letters of recommendation. If you have logistical questions about how do I upload my transcripts, those kinds of things, we're here for all of it from beginning to end. Some awards do require endorsement or nomination from your home university. The Foreign Service graduate fellowships do not require that, but some awards do. If you come across an award that does require that, or one of them that we talk about today, know that our office manages that process. We don't decide who from ASU gets endorsed or nominated by the university. We just manage that process. For some of those awards, we are limited to how many from the university can be nominated. And for some of them, like the Fulbright U.S. Student Program, there's no limits on that. We can endorse as many applicants as who come forward. But again, we just kind of manage that process, and it can look different by each award that requires that. And then just in general, we're your cheerleaders, your supporters, your coaches all along the way in your pursuit of national scholarships and fellowships that are just one step in your overall journey towards what you're ultimately going to do academically and professionally in your lives. So in a nutshell, that's what ONSA is. And again, we're here to support kind of everybody in the ASU ecosystem. So undergraduate students, graduate students, alumni of the university. We do have a physical office located on the Tempe campus in Honors Hall on the Tempe campus. But as you can see right now, we offer everything, including individual advising appointments virtually as well. So we're accessible to our students on other campuses as well as our online students. So that's us, and that's what you can expect from us if you apply for any of these fellowships or any of the other 100 or so awards we advise on. So I would like to now take a moment to introduce our special guest. So she is a Foreign Service Officer with the U.S. Department of State and has been for nearly 2 decades now. She has a lot of robust experience living and working in a variety of places throughout the world as an FSO, as a representative of U.S. interests through the Department of State. Her current station is as the diplomat in residence in the Southwest region. So we are lucky enough at ASU to have her as a support and champion for our students and alumni who are interested in careers with the State Department in general, but especially within the Foreign Service, since that's her particular area that she's in. But she is just a great support to advise and guide our students in the ample opportunities there are at various levels within the State Department. And I'll turn things over to her now to share a little bit about kind of her background and experience. So thank you, Antoinette.
Thank you, Faye. I'm wondering, should we advance one slide as well? I just want to make sure I cover some of the highlights that I think the next slide showed, but if I'm getting too far ahead. Okay, yes. So I am, as she mentioned, what's called a Foreign Service Officer, which is one of the many diplomatic careers that you can have with the U.S. Department of State. Backing up a bit, of course, first, the U.S. Department of State is the foreign affairs arm of the U.S. federal government. So we are in the business of advancing U.S. foreign policy and interests overseas. So international affairs, diplomacy, living abroad, that is sort of the work that we do as a diplomat. I have been a diplomat for 20 years next month. I've served in Australia, Brazil, Afghanistan, Italy. I've had some assignments domestically at our headquarters in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, now as the diplomat in residence for the Southwest, which Shay mentioned. So I'm actually based in Las Vegas, Nevada. And what is a diplomat in residence and what does that mean in terms of my relationship and my support for you all? Basically, we are all seasoned diplomats who've been doing this for some time, and our current assignment is to be the regional recruiter. So I do recruitment for the Southwest, which is Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. And so I'm here to help answer questions that you might have to sort of get the word out about our opportunities, many that you'll see on the slides that Shay is going to present momentarily in terms of student programs, but also in terms of careers. So just a brief note in terms of the structure of the workforces to help clarify things, perhaps maybe some questions that some of you might have. So in the U.S. Department of State, we have mainly 2 workforces. One is the civil service and one is the foreign service. The civil service is our domestic workforce. So it's going to be everyone who is working for us, but based in the States. Most of these positions are going to be in Washington, D.C., where our headquarters is. But then we also have some offices across the U.S. For example, we have the Passport Agency in Tucson, a bit down the road from you all, where there are opportunities for jobs. So that's the civil service. And then we have the foreign service. That is going to be everyone like myself who is a diplomat, an American diplomat, living and working at our U.S. embassies and consulates overseas, spending at least about half your career overseas. And so in the foreign service, we, of course, are the largest agency that has, or the agency that has the largest foreign service, because that is our bread and butter. That's what we do. But there are a couple of other agencies that also have foreign services, some of them relevant to the fellowships that she will speak about in just a moment. That's just a little bit about kind of the breakdown of our workforce opportunities. We have these fellowships that we'll discuss shortly that are career pipelines to the foreign service. We are paying a large amount of money through these fellowships to those who win them. And so having a financial need for graduate school is definitely part of the application process, and you'll actually have to write one of your essays on that. And then, of course, we want to make sure that our foreign service is representative of all of America, right? So we really want to make sure that we are particularly encouraging those from underrepresented and underserved backgrounds, in addition to those who have financial need for grad school, to apply. I myself am a Pickering Fellow. That is how I joined the U.S. Department of State. I am a Latino first-generation college student, and I learned about the Pickering Fellowship when I was an undergrad. And a recruiter came to my college campus and talked about this opportunity. And I really don't think I would have found my way to becoming a diplomat without it. It's been an incredible experience, and it's given me this 2-decade career of traveling the world and doing something that really matters and that's positive. So I know there will be questions later, so I'll save that to later, but that's just a quick note about who I am and how it can be a resource for you.
Actually, I do want to open it up for a moment before we jump into the specific fellowships that can help you pursue this kind of career. I just wanted to hear from Antoinette, and then if you all have any questions about kind of what you can expect as an FSO in your career. I know a lot of times we get questions about where you go in the world, how long you're there, how is that decided, how much control do you have over those kinds of things, kind of what is it like when you're stationed at an embassy abroad. So just like in a nutshell, can you share a little bit about that with us, Antoinette?
Sorry, just putting a quick link in the chat as well. So yes, I should also back up to say that in the Foreign Service in the U.S. Department of State, we actually have 2 pathways in the Foreign Service. You can become a Foreign Service officer, an FSO like me. That's a generalist diplomatic career, meaning you're going to work on a lot of different things across your career. I've worked on human rights issues, trafficking in persons issues, environmental issues, just all sorts of things. But then you can also become a Foreign Service specialist. And in fact, one of the fellowships that we talk about today is to become a specialist. Now, the Foreign Service specialists, as that name suggests, are people who are going to specialize. So we have careers as diplomats, but who specialize for people in IT, for people in engineering, for people in law enforcement, for people in administration and management, for those who want to do medicine. We have all sorts of opportunities as a foreign service specialist as well. That's why I always tell students in my sessions when I'm on campus, 99.9% of the time, whatever your major is, we have a career for you at the U.S. Department of State. But in terms of life as an FSO, and I'm so glad, Shay, that you phrased it this way, because being an American diplomat is not just a career, it really is a lifestyle, it's a way of being. You are a diplomat 24/7, especially when you're overseas, but even when you're domestic, right? And so it's a privilege, but it's also something that you've got to be aware of, not just in the work that you do, but then also when you come home from work. You don't want things that you do in your free time ending up in the newspaper in the country that you're serving in the next day. So it really is a way of being. You're changing assignments every couple of years as a diplomat. For me, I was always one who got bored pretty easily, so I loved that aspect of the job. I love that I got to change assignments every few years, even though the State Department has been my only employer since grad school for going on 20 years now. I've had, oh gosh, I don't know, 8 or 9 different assignments, so it's always felt like I've been doing something different and new and building skills, which I love. So you've got to be comfortable with picking up your family, and your things and moving every couple of years to a new country, learning a new language, working on different issues. Starting again with building, friends and support network and being far away, at times from your friends and family. So it really is something to think about the whole lifestyle and think about if it's for you. For me, I say these things like travel, learn a new language, change assignments every couple of years. And when I was in college, I was like, yes, that sounds amazing. That sounds exactly like what I want to do. But it is important that you think through that and really make sure that you know what all is expected here. And in terms of your assignments, you do have, for the majority of your career, agency in terms of pursuing only assignments that you're interested in. However, the first 2 assignments in the Foreign Service are what we call directed, meaning we tell you where to go. But it's really not that scary. We're not sort of like the military in the sense where we tell you where to go, you have no choice, and we'll be sending you, into a war zone in the very first assignment. I didn't go to Afghanistan until much later in my career, and it was 100% my choice. But in the first 2 assignments, they're directed. So during your orientation time, you will get a list of all the positions that are available. You rank them high, medium, and low. You work with the equivalent of a SHE, right, an advisor, a career counselor, to kind of help you decide, what's most important to you for that assignment and where you want to go. And then we try to fit the pieces of the puzzle, so try to fit people's preferences and our needs together. So most people are getting their high or their medium in terms of those first two assignments. After those first two assignments, then you're only pursuing assignments that you are interested in. So again, then you have much more agency and much more control over where you go in your career. Let's see, I know you had mentioned a couple of questions when you turned it over to Misha. Did I cover a little bit on all of them? Were there some that I haven't touched on yet?
Yeah, I think that covers what I kind of opened with. And I know there were two questions that came through in the chat, and you've answered both of those. Before we kind of get a little bit more into the fellowships, I'll just see, are there any other questions? I just saw another one come through. So what work opportunities exist for spouses at embassies and consulates? I'm guessing if you're an FSO and can your spouse get employment also with the embassy and consulate while you're stationed abroad?
So there are a number of opportunities for spousal employment overseas. The first is, yes, at most embassies, certainly the bigger and the medium ones, there are going to be some positions that are held for what we call eligible family members, which could be either your spouse or your child under 21 or 26, I think. So there are some positions at our embassies and consulates where family members can work. Depending on the size of the embassy, these might be more administrative positions, but some embassies will have positions in the political section or the public diplomacy section or consular section, others, where they have positions held for family members. That's one option, but I'd honestly say that's probably the smallest option. Another option is that your spouse can work on the local market. Now you have to see when you go about the bidding process. Bidding is the process that is the name that we use for the process of pursuing the next assignment, right? Researching it, seeing, putting yourself forward for these positions, interviewing, etc. We call it bidding. So when you go through the bidding process, you will want to pay attention to posts that have a bilateral work agreement with the host country. When that exists, then your spouse can work on the local market as though they are a local, so they don't have to go through sort of the additional visa hoops that a non-diplomat would have to go through. That's another option. A third option is, of course, they can work remotely from anywhere, from your home. So many different options for spousal employment. It's something that you'll want to look into for each different assignment, depending on what you and your spouse want, for each other and where you decide to go in the world. But definitely different options. And I do want to just say a word about the earlier question, what majors are preferred? We are looking really for all majors. And in fact, increasingly, we are looking for maybe the non-traditional majors, right? Like my bachelor's was in international affairs, my master's was in public policy. A lot of people I meet who are interested in this career are sort of along those majors. But I have colleagues who are FSOs who are chemistry majors, who are engineering majors. We need all of that background, especially the STEM background, more and more. We need that background and that perspective from our colleagues to help us solve these global challenges. So really, we're looking for all majors, but increasingly sort of from these STEM backgrounds. We are also especially looking for, and let me share another link here. One moment. So as a foreign service officer, I mentioned that we're generalist diplomats, right? We're going to do a lot of things across our career. And for that reason, you don't have to have a certain type of degree. Technically, you don't have to have a degree to apply, but of course, a lot of people do. So as a foreign service officer, though we're a generalist, you have to choose one of 5 career tracks. That's the link I just put in the chat here. The 5 career tracks are political, public diplomacy, economic, management, and consular. We have an increasing need for management, consular, and economic officers. And in fact, it may mean that you get hired sooner if you have selected one of those 5. It's kind of like declaring your major. When you go to start the application process, you have to say which of these 5 career tracks you are most interested in. So again, increasingly we are looking for those with business, management, administration majors, econ majors, consular work that can be those interested in immigration law, those majoring in social work, all sorts of different things. So I just wanted to address that just so folks know any major, but then we're also especially looking for folks who are interested in that area.
So Antoinette, I'm going to combine kind of two of these questions since they're related. Um, do you have to speak multiple languages to be an FSO? And what is the language kind of training that would be involved when you are assigned a new region or country?
Sure. So much like I tell students, you don't have to be an IR major to join to become a diplomat. You do not have to know a foreign language already. A number of people do, but it's not required at all. The State Department will teach you whatever language you need to know if it's required for your onward assignment. So I came into the State Department with Spanish. I've never served in a Spanish-speaking country. Instead, the State Department taught me Portuguese before I went to Brazil. They taught me Italian before I went to Italy. So we will teach you, it will be your full-time job, you will get your full-time salary, and it will be your full-time job to do language training at our equivalent of a university campus before you go on to an assignment that requires a language. So you do not have to speak a foreign language before you join. We will teach you. However, if you do speak a foreign language before you join, that's great, and you might use those skills. It's also advantageous because in the application process, and it's a bit complex, so I won't go into all the details of it now, but what I will say is towards the end of the application process, there are two ways that you can add additional points to get a higher place on the list to be hired sooner. I guess if that makes sense. So one of these ways is to be a veteran, because we have veterans preference points for all of our careers. The second way is to speak one of a handful of foreign languages determined to be of most need at that particular time, to speak one of those languages at a high enough level. You will take a phone test to test your fluency, and if you do pass, then you get to add some additional points to sort of your place in line, putting you ahead and closer towards being hired sooner. So again, don't need a foreign language before you join. Great if you have it though, it might be advantageous to you during the application process. And just as I mentioned that being a veteran also is advantageous in the application process. I see a question in the chat about prior military experience. We absolutely welcome that. About 20% of our workforce is actually veterans. So a large number of service members go on to join us to continue their public service with the U.S. Department of State. We have a number of benefits for veterans. Veterans preference points for all the careers, foreign service and civil service careers is one of them, but we also have other ways that we support our veterans. I mean, I won't get too much into the details, might only apply to a few folks, but there's a way where you can like buy back your years of service in the military and add them to your time with the State Department to count towards your retirement. So you don't have to do a full 20 years in the State Department for retirement, lots of different things like that. So absolutely we welcome those with prior military experience.
So we have had a lot of great additional questions come through. We won't necessarily have time to get to all of them, but I'm going to try to compile some of these that go together. So, oh, I see someone's having a hard time hearing Antoinette. I don't know if that's across the board or maybe somebody individually. Looks like maybe a little bit on both. So Antoinette, if you want to maybe turn up your volume a little bit, maybe that'll help.
If I could chime in, it's not necessarily the volume, it's just more that her words are getting lost in the ether, if that makes any sense. Like it sounds like they're being spread out further away from where she is than where the mic is. Because
Oh,
the
okay.
volume is not my problem.
Gotcha.
Yes, that's the word. That's the word. That's a great word for what I was looking
A,
for. Muffled.
a little muffled. So maybe you're breaking up a little bit. Maybe I don't know where the mic is in comparison to where you are. Okay, so we will go on to some of these other questions. So you've answered some other ones. Another one that came up is if somebody decides after a few kind of tours or deployments with the Foreign Service that this ultimately is not the kind of life for them long term, would transitioning into another agency with the federal government or another role besides being in the Foreign Service be something that would be looked negatively on or hinder them in transitioning to kind of something else in the service realm?
So, unlike, and hopefully folks can hear me, I know just sometimes internet, sometimes Wi-Fi is not our friends, and sometimes things get muffled, but hopefully my voice comes back soon enough that I'll just maybe lean in to the laptop mic a bit more. Also, just quickly first, I just put a link in the chat because someone asked about our different support services for veterans. So the link I shared is not exhaustive, but it's an example of some of the different support services that we offer. So we are not like the military in terms of you have to like serve for 10 years or 15, I don't know, whatever. You can leave us at any point. Now, the only caveat that I will say to that is that for our fellowships, they are sort of like our version of ROTC in that we pay for the student's education, they have a guaranteed job to come and work for us when they graduate, and they do have to complete 5 years of service with us, so 5 years of working for us. If they leave before the 5 years, then they are at risk of having to pay back everything that we paid for their graduate degree and more, and internships, et cetera. That's the only caveat. But once you have joined as a Foreign Service officer or any of the Foreign Service careers, you are free to leave whenever you want. There is no direct path from Foreign Service to civil service. It would be, you just start a new application. But certainly any government experience is going to be helpful and useful in your resume for applying to any other government agency opportunity. I can only speak for U.S. Department of State opportunities, so I can't speak for DoD or Department of Education or others in terms of where you might be interested in transferring to. But there is nothing stopping you from leaving the Foreign Service if at any time you decide, okay, this really, after all, is not the lifestyle for me and for my family at this particular point. I do see some questions on dual citizenship. And so let me just address this too, because this always comes up as well. Being a dual citizen is not in and of itself a disqualifier in terms of the security clearance process. We will investigate it during the security clearance process. They will look into your ties, how you've exercised your citizenship. Do you vote in another country's elections? Have you served in another country's military? Do you own property overseas? How extensive are your connections with family and friends overseas? They'll look into all of that. It's not a disqualifier, but it will be looked into. Now, something that occasionally does happen is if they are seeing that your connections to your second country of citizenship are so strong that it might make you, susceptible to undue influence, they may restrict your assignments and say, well, you just can't serve in that country. And it's not just that your relationships are so close or your connections are so close that in and of itself isn't quite the problem. The bigger problem is that if you are a dual citizen, then that country, should anything happen, that country will treat you as a citizen of its country and not as an American citizen. So we cannot protect you. You will not have diplomatic immunity and we cannot protect you. This is actually the larger reason why in some cases we do not let dual citizens, if they decide to keep their dual citizenship, serve in that country of second citizenship. So I hope that answers that question.
And then another one that's come up that is a little more nuanced and really based on your own experience, if you are comfortable sharing, is have you in your time as an FSO experienced imposter syndrome, and how have you navigated that if you have?
Sure, I think it's something to a certain extent, maybe all of us at some time or another feel in our careers, but certainly as a woman of color, and certainly as a first generation college student, I felt that at various points. When you're first beginning this career, there's really nothing like this career to prepare you for exactly what we do as a diplomat. So it can feel a bit overwhelming at first, sort of the grandness and the scale of responsibility that we have for these really important global issues and the work that we do on them. So definitely in my first assignment, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm an American diplomat. How am I going to learn how to do this thing? You just sort of learn from your colleagues. Hopefully you have good, supervisors and mentors who can who can walk you through it. But it's very much a learn as you go and learn on the job kind of process. So in that, it's very unlike other careers where, you know, if you have a degree in engineering, you know how to do engineering. You can have a degree in international affairs, I suppose, but it doesn't mean you know how to be a diplomat. It's a very different type of skill set. And it's just a very different type of work. There's nothing academically, I think, that can truly prepare you for the exact work that we do on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, you learn, you do your best, you see how your colleagues are, you know, going about their job, ask questions, ask for mentorship, ask for advice, you know, all of these things that we do to help make ourselves better. So yes, certainly I've experienced that, but you work through it, you learn more, and you grow.
Great, thank you. And I know there's been some other questions that have come up that from my vantage point, I think Antoinette has addressed in her other responses, and a couple that are upcoming as we dive into the fellowships. So I'm going to transition a little bit into the fellowships now. And if at the end there's anything that didn't get answered, please let us know. And I'm also going to share contact information for both me and Antoinette at the end of the presentation. So you'll have access to be able to reach out to both of us as well.
Yes, and actually, Shay, I'm going to go ahead and try to answer some of the questions maybe that seem to be remaining in the chat.
Okay.
As you're speaking. But I wanted to share a few things too. Number one, in the chat is my email, which you'll see on a future slide in just a moment. But you can reach out to me with any questions you have from this session. The second is a link where you can register with me with the State Department's Talent Network to let us know what kinds of opportunities you're interested in. Is it IT jobs, engineering? Is it internships, fellowships? There'll be a list and you just select what you're interested in so that as jobs open up, as fellowships open up, as internships open up, you can get an email directly and know, especially with our internships, they're only open for like 7 or 10 days. So if you're not on our mailing list, then you won't know about these opportunities. So I just highly encourage you, especially for fellowships and internships, but also for careers, if you are all interested in receiving notifications about jobs and different programs that open up, you can register there as well. But I'll answer some things in the chat while you're moving on. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, so again, there's also, there is a department missing off of this slide, the Department of Commerce, but some of the existing fellowships for the Foreign Service that we're going to talk about today, especially the ones that are currently open, are on the screen right now. So if you want to become kind of a generalist in the Foreign Service, which is what Antoinette is, right? And what those 5 career tracks she dropped in as a link to the chat earlier, which will also be shared via email with everybody after the session. So if you want to become like that generalist Foreign Service officer, then there's both the Pickering and Rangel fellowships with the Department of State. The fellowships are nearly identical. The applications are identical, although you apply to them both separately, and they're considered separately by different committees. Those are both currently open and due in September 19th and September 26th, respectively. Then if you want to become more of a specialist within the Foreign Service with the Department of State, these aren't the only kinds of specialists you can become within the Foreign Service, but if you want to become an IT specialist, or a security specialist or a security agent with the State Department's Foreign Service, they each have their own respective fellowships as well. There's the Foreign Affairs Information Technology Fellowship, or FATE Fellowship, and then the Clark DS Diplomatic Security Fellowship. So if you want to become like a security agent, keep the diplomatic officers abroad safe while they're abroad, if that is the role you want to take. There's also individual fellowships for both of those. The FATE one will open soon, and we'll actually have a session sometime in November for that, specifically for ASU students and alumni who are interested in that route. And then the Clark DS one has historically opened and been due in the spring. So just kind of to be determined, but if you sign up for getting updates from Antoinette, like she mentioned just a moment ago, then you'll get notified when that opens as well. If you have an interest in being a Foreign Service Officer with USAID and want to be more development focused with your Foreign Service career, so less on the diplomatic side and more on the development side of U.S. interests abroad, then the Payne Fellowship is a route you might want to take. That application is also currently open and is identical to Rangel and Pickering as well, and is due about a month after them in October. And then kind of a very different route is the Department of Agriculture. So if your focus is agriculture, agribusiness, going to countries and kind of helping within their agriculture, there's the Foreign Agricultural Services through USDA, and they have their own fellowship as well, which should be opening soon. Out of all of the foreign service with the federal government, Department of State again does make up the largest number of foreign service officers or people within the foreign service. But then these other departments kind of have smaller foreign service arms as well, that you could pursue careers in depending on your areas of interest. And again, the Zoom is recorded and will be shared after the next live session, which is next week. So with these fellowships in mind, you can apply to any and all of them that are applicable to your background and your interests moving forward. With the Department of State and USAID, they're not necessarily looking for any specific background with that in terms of your majors, minors, certificates, language skills, right? When you apply to the fellowship. However, pursuing the graduate fellowship to pursue your graduate studies, they are looking for you to do something that is relevant to the foreign service. And that is a kind of a long list, but there's information on their websites, and we can talk through that more as well if you have questions about specific graduate degrees you would want to pursue. In a nutshell, even though the department that you would go through and maybe even the specific role within the department is going to be slightly different with each one of these fellowships, they generally provide kind of a similar experience and have similar eligibility, which we'll get to shortly. Okay, looks like all the questions are being answered. A really quick note is I just wanted to share with you, we've been kind of digging into a little bit of historical information with these fellowships, especially with Pickering and Rangel, which Antoinette is a Pickering, was a Pickering fellow herself, is a Pickering alum. So from ASU, that's current ASU students or alumni who have applied for Pickering and Rangel specifically within the past decade. There's been a total of 14 from the ASU community who have been selected. A couple of those have pursued their graduate studies at ASU as well, but most of them have actually gone on to other universities for their graduate studies. That's all okay by us. We're here to support you either way. But that's quite a large number. There's actually only 3 universities that have had a higher number of Pickering and Rangel fellows than that over the past 10 years. And all of those universities are based in the DC area, which tends to be a little bit more focused in international affairs and foreign service than the Southwest has been historically. But that's a great thing about these fellowships is they're trying to broaden the representation of American citizens within the Foreign Service, and that includes being from somewhere like the Southwest region. So just to know, like ASU students have what these fellowships are looking for. So just keep that in mind. That's a question we often get, like what's the likeliness that somebody from ASU will get selected for these kinds of opportunities? So the eligibility, and this is going to be eligibility to become a foreign service officer as well, this first one, you do have to be a US citizen in order to be eligible for the fellowship as well as the foreign service in general. Can be a dual citizen like Antoinette mentioned, but there are some caveats there, and it can lead to more in terms of your security clearance and how, what they're looking into. Specifically with the fellowships, you do have to have a minimum 3.2 GPA from your undergraduate studies, and that is a hard and fast. It cannot be lower than that. If you have multiple institutions that you've attended, that can vary how that's calculated, and we can talk through those nuances more individually, but you do have to have a minimum 3.2 GPA when you apply to these fellowships to be eligible. And then which was a question that came up before, you do have to pass, once you're selected, you do have to pass the medical security and suitability clearances, all of the same ones that are required to become a foreign service officer with the federal government. You will have to pass those to ultimately become an FSO, and that's something that happens once you're selected for the fellowship. So having a strong idea that you would pass these kinds of clearances is a good idea as you decide to pursue them. There's more information provided on the Department of State website on those clearances, but I know that question did come up. And then these fellowships are for those who have a demonstrated financial need to fund your graduate studies. So if you haven't had a financial need for your undergraduate studies for whatever reason, but you wouldn't be able to go to grad school without getting some kind of financial support, then that's really who these fellowships are designed for. If you can afford to just pay for graduate school outright by yourself or with your family's help, then these fellowships might not be the best route for you. But if you're like, I would need to take out loans, I would need to wait a long time before I could afford to go to graduate school, those kinds of things, then that's really who these fellowships are designed for. And then what they'll provide you with. So they, all of them, regardless of which one you apply for and ultimately get selected for, will provide generous funding towards your 2-year graduate degree that is relevant to the Foreign Service. That graduate degree does have to be in person. It does have to be at a US-based university, and again, relevant to the Foreign Service, which depending on which fellowship you're pursuing, that can vary slightly what they determine is relevant to the Foreign Service. For instance, USDA, it very specifically has to be in agriculture or agribusiness, whereas with the Department of State general ones and the USAID general one, that's a little bit more kind of options within that field, whereas the Foreign Affairs Information Technology, it really does have to be a technology specific degree that you're pursuing. But they'll provide you with funding, both tuition funding and living stipend funding over that 2-year program. And then you'll also engage in paid summer internships. The first one for all of these fellowships does happen in DC. It might be with the relevant department or with Congress, again, depending on which specific one you pursue. And then the second internship happens abroad. So like at an embassy, consulate, or mission abroad is where you would go for that second internship during your fellowship experience. And again, they pay you a stipend during both of those internship opportunities. Throughout the fellowship experience, you will also receive a mentor who is an experienced FSO or specialist within the Foreign Service themselves, and they'll kind of be there to mentor you through that as well. And then, as was mentioned earlier by Antoinette, there is a service commitment that comes with all of these fellowships. So you are guaranteed, if you make it through the fellowship, through your graduate program, and through all of those clearances successfully, then you're guaranteed employment with the Foreign Service, with the relevant agency upon completion. Not only are you guaranteed, but you are actually also required. They're expecting you to commit a minimum of 5 years of working in the Foreign Service with that department once you complete the fellowship. If you do not fulfill that commitment, then you can be held liable to repay all of the financial support that you've received thus far. So whether that's partway through the fellowship experience or after you've already completed the fellowship experience, they'll kind of determine how much you would have to pay back based on that information. So you're guaranteed the employment, but there is that commitment that you're saying, I will stay employed with them for a minimum of 5 years, which with the Department of State, that typically includes about 2 different kind of deployments that you would go on during that time frame. So before I move on, I just saw a question about if there is a medical condition, we won't be able to move forward. That is actually not the case. There are medical clearances that are required to go through for the fellowship and to become a foreign service officer, but that doesn't mean just because you have a condition means you wouldn't be suitable for the foreign service. So I don't know if there's something that Antoinette wants to add to that. I also don't want to get into any specific medical information on a chat like this. Again, our information has been shared and will be shared at the end as well. So if that's something more individualized you want to get addressed, we can talk through it at a one-on-one opportunity. But Antoinette, just in kind of general, is there anything you want to add to that question?
Yeah, so similar to the security clearance process, and I guess in this sense, we're a bit more lenient than the other government agencies, some who require, or some if you have had any drug use, you're immediately disqualified, or if you've done this, that, or the other, you're immediately disqualified. For us, we take a holistic approach to the security clearance as well as to the medical review. So everything will be looked at sort of in context for the security clearance. I'm just going to mention this because sometimes this comes up later in the Q&A too. When did the offense, so to speak, happen? How often was it? How long ago was it? These sorts of things. I always tell applicants, both for these fellowships as well as for the careers, start acting now as though you have a security clearance, so that if there is anything potentially, that is not as favorable, that is in the rear view by the time you would go to go through the security clearance process. With the medical review, it's also a holistic review. There's nothing that's an automatic disqualifier. You do, though, because as I mentioned, this is a lifestyle, right? This is not just a career. So you do have to be able to serve overseas in the majority of the places where we have a U.S. embassy or consulate. Now, the majority of places where we have an embassy or consulate are not the Romes and the Londons and the Parises of the world, right? We're in Ouagadougou, we're in La Paz, we're in Ho Chi Minh, we're in just a number of different places. And your health has to be able to support serving successfully as a diplomat.
So again, it's a little bit more nuanced. So if we want to get into more specific information around that, that's a one-on-one conversation that can be had at a later time. And I see other questions are kind of being answered as we go through. So thank you for that, Antoinette. So if you're not quite there yet, either in your academic journey or just in kind of you feel you're not overall prepared for beginning graduate school or beginning a fellowship like this, like next year, or it's not something that you're ready to kind of commit yourself to where you're like, yes, I'll do this 2-year fellowship and then I'm ready to commit 5 more years after that. Here's some other opportunities depending on where you're at in that academically and kind of just personally and professionally that you might want to consider. So first, a couple of opportunities that can just support you in terms of just exploring international affairs and the Foreign Service, but international affairs in general as well. So there's the Rangel Summer Enrichment Program. So we talked about the Rangel Graduate Fellowship. That's the main one to pursue your graduate studies and then become an FSO afterwards. However, they have an undergraduate program as well, which is just a summer experience for 6 weeks for anybody who is in their 2nd through 4th year of undergraduate studies currently. So as long as you're not a 1st-year undergrad and as long as you still have undergraduate studies to go, or you will not be graduated by May of this year, you can apply for the Rangel Summer Enrichment Program to spend 6 weeks at Howard University in DC, just exploring international affairs, both in terms of pursuing graduate school and a career related to international affairs. And you'll gain more exposure and experience relevant to the Foreign Service through that as well, although it's not explicitly only for those who want to go into the Foreign Service. Then there's the Public Policy and International Affairs Junior Summer Institute, which Antoinette is also an alumni of this fellowship program, which is for current third-year undergraduate students who know that they want to pursue graduate school in the policy or international affairs realm, and they know that they want to have a service-oriented career, which the Foreign Service would be a service-oriented career. And this is a summer experience that happens at different universities throughout the US, like Princeton and Berkeley, where you can go and do grad school preparation as well as learn more about both graduate school and a career within policy or international affairs, kind of within that overall realm. If you're a current second or third year undergraduate student, there's also the U.S. Foreign Service Internship Program, which that application will be opening soon. And that's a 2-year summer internship program through the State Department with the Foreign Service. So it's kind of like the fellowships we mentioned today, the graduate fellowships, it comes with that 2-year summer internship, paid summer internship, the first one being in DC and the second one being abroad. It doesn't come with the scholarship funding. It also doesn't come with the service commitment. So it's just an opportunity to gain that experience without fully committing to the Foreign Service. So those are some opportunities our office advises on to kind of help you further explore international affairs and would be good stepping stones to one of these fellowships. Then there's a few that are more like international, like you would definitely go somewhere internationally and or learn a language through these opportunities that our office advises on. And I'll just make a quick note. If you notice throughout this slide, there's been a few photos of ASU alumni, and all of them have been either a Pickering or a Rangel Fellow over the past 5 or so years. But you may have also noticed that they also had other programs that were listed, other awards that were listed with their names. So like Antoinette herself, both a Pickering and a PPIA Fellow, right? Nearly all of those 14 ASU alumni who have won one of these fellowships over the past 10 years have previously been selected for other awards. So they're especially in these global and language focused awards. So they're also wonderful stepping stones to ultimately a career in the Foreign Service and one of these fellowships. So there's the Critical Languages Scholarship, which is paid summer language intensives that happen in 14 different languages. So you apply for the specific language that you want to learn. If you're selected, you go to a country where that language is predominantly spoken over the summer, and it's fully funded for you to do this. You can do this anytime in undergraduate or graduate studies. And then there's also the Boren Awards. So this is where you select the language, you select the study abroad program that you want to go on, and then you apply for the scholarship to fund it. This is typically for things that happen more long-term. They have a preference for programs that are 6 months to a year. So typically not over the summer. This also can be applied for anytime in undergrad or graduate studies. And in September, we'll actually be having a critical languages information session that will focus predominantly on the critical languages scholarship, Boren, and the next one, FLAS, Foreign Language and Area Studies. This is an external grant that ASU has received. And then, so ASU students are able to apply for FLAS funds to pursue their language study in some Eastern European and Eurasian languages that are offered. So that can be to just continue your study of them here at ASU, or there can be a going to that country component as well. And that focuses, again, predominantly on Eastern European and Eurasian languages. So any and all of these would be great language learning opportunities for you that can build your skills and experience towards the Foreign Service. Then in terms of just going abroad, if you're a current undergraduate student, there's the Gilman International Scholarship that is to receive funding to do any credit-bearing study abroad program, whether it's language learning language learning focused or not. You do have to be a Pell Grant recipient to be eligible for Gilman, though, so that's important to keep in mind. And then if you're looking to do an abroad experience after you've earned your bachelor's degree, and before you go on for something like Pickering, Rangel, Payne, and the Foreign Service, ultimately, the Fulbright U.S. Student Program is an opportunity to spend a whole academic year abroad once you have your bachelor's degree to either teach English, engage in academic study, or do research of some kind. And with this one specifically, you can actually apply for Fulbright and Pickering Rangel at the same time. And it's one of, if not the only thing that the Pickering and Rangel Fellowship will allow you to defer a year for. So these graduate fellowships generally don't let you defer enrollment in the program. But if you're doing a Fulbright ETA, that's the English teaching assistant option for Fulbright, they actually will allow you to defer that. So every year we see students who apply for both, not this past year, but the year before. Our Pickering fellow from ASU applied for both Pickering and Fulbright, was selected for both, did his Fulbright the following year, and is now about to embark on the Pickering Fellowship. And then a lot of our past Pickering and Rangel fellows from ASU applied while they were on their Fulbright experience, and then were selected and went straight from their Fulbright experience into their Pickering or Rangel Fellowship. So a lot of these are, again, great opportunities, great stepping stones to the next thing, especially if you're not at a place academically, personally, or professionally to kind of commit to graduate school, one of these fellowships, or ultimately the employment in the Foreign Service after. So some upcoming webinars. I know Antoinette has been mentioning some of them in the chat already, but tomorrow there will be a webinar specifically on FAIT. That's the Foreign Affairs Information Technology Fellowship. So if you wanted to be an information management specialist within the Foreign Service specifically, then that webinar is happening tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Then next week, Pickering and Rangel will be offering a couple of different webinars, one specifically on writing your statements for the application. That's going to be on August 19th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And then the following day on August 20th, there's going to be kind of the lifestyle of a Foreign Service officer. So you'll be able to hear a little bit more and from a few more people about their experience as an FSO, as Antoinette's been so kind and gracious to share with us a little bit about her experience today. And then about 2 weeks from now, on the 27th, Antoinette will be hosting a panel from fellow to Foreign Service. So these are all former fellows who are now FSOs, including herself, who will be speaking about their experience. And this is a showcase specifically for folks who are from Hispanic serving institutions, which ASU is one. Many of our students and alumni here are Hispanic, and so that's kind of geared towards that audience. So I know there were some questions kind of relevant to that kind of experience as well. So great opportunity to hear from, again, some additional folks and Antoinette again as well. So next steps. If you're interested in any and all of these, definitely do some research on the agency or agencies that you would be interested in applying for the Foreign Service with. If you're interested in more than one, great. You want to look into each one of them and the specific fellowships that you would maybe be interested in. If you're pursuing graduate studies through one of the graduate fellowships, you also need to make a short list, if you have not already, of the graduate programs that you would want to pursue through the fellowship, because you will also have to separately apply to those graduate programs this year if you're applying to the fellowship this year. There are a list of partner programs on each of the fellowship's websites. You do not have to apply to one of those programs, but they are great opportunities to see what types of programs do these fellows typically participate in for graduate school. And also the partner programs have typically agreed to offer additional financial support if a fellow is admitted to their program. So that's, again, a great starting point, but not necessarily a requirement to go to one of those programs specifically. You can attend any and all of the relevant upcoming webinars that are happening. Again, there's some outside of ASU happening over the next couple weeks that refer to these specific fellowship opportunities. But then there's also upcoming ones in the next month or so that are about like the critical languages one or the Gilman one, right? Depending on where you're at in that journey. So keep an eye out both on what's happening from the Department of State, from these other fellowships, as well as from the Office of National Scholarships Advisement. Connect with any current and past fellows. So I've shared on each of these slides, some of the ASU alumni are current and past fellows of these programs. You can also find those folks listed on our website, and you can find them on LinkedIn typically. So great way to connect and kind of ask them a little bit more about their experience in the fellowship as an FSO, and also just applying to the fellowship experiences. You will have to have 2 recommendations for each of these graduate fellowship applications. So start reaching out to those referees that might write those letters. You want to do that sooner rather than later, especially if you're applying to Pickering and Rangel this year. So those deadlines are about 6 weeks out, and that's really in the window where you want to start making those requests if people are going to write letters for you. You want to start your application if it's time, and reach out to me if you're starting your application. My information will be shared at the end. And you can also schedule an appointment with me at any time to talk about your application and to receive feedback. So our office is here to support you as you work on this application. Most of that means helping you with your statements. So giving you guidance and feedback on the written statements that you'll submit for any and all of these fellowships. We also have a Canvas page that has some self-guided resources for you as you work on these applications. So once you start an application, you can let me know and I will give you access to that Canvas page for those resources. So it's been shared in the chat, but also if you want to reach out to Antoinette after today, her email is on the screen right now. Mine is also as well. And then the third one you see here who hasn't been with us this evening is my colleague, Dr. Lori Stoff. She's the one that actually the critical language focused fellowships, so CLS, Boren, and FLAS here at ASU, those that are be opening later this year, and we'll have that information session in September for those. She's the advisor for those awards specifically. So if or when you're ready to apply for any of those, she's going to be a great contact as well. So I see another question that popped up. I know we've reached and surpassed our time, and some people have hopped off as they well should. I'm going to go ahead and conclude the session and conclude our recording, but I'm going to stick around for any additional questions that we've missed.
Thanks for having me, Shayla, and please email me dirsouthwest@state.gov for any of you who have questions about